Have you ever just stopped and wondered, how do people actually decide what's right and what's wrong? Well, for literally billions of people over 2,000 years, the answer lies in something called Christian ethics. Today, we're going to unpack this whole system of thought, from its ancient roots all the way to its role in today's most intense debates. So here's our game plan. First, we'll cover the basics. What even is Christian ethics? Then we're going straight to the source material, the biblical story that it's all built on. We'll also check out a few different ways people think through these rules. And finally, we'll see how it all shakes out in the real world. Ready? Let's get into it. You know, it really all boils down to this one question. It's a question every single one of us faces, from tiny choices to those huge, life-altering decisions. This whole business of good versus evil, right and wrong, it's a fundamental challenge of being human. And Christian ethics, it offers one very specific, very influential way to find the answers. Okay, so let's start by getting our definitions straight. We'll begin with the big, broad idea of ethics in general, and then we'll really narrow our focus to see what makes Christian ethics so distinct. So the word ethics actually comes from the Greek word ethos, which just means custom or behavior. You can think of it as the why behind what we do. It's not just some dusty old rule book, it's a whole system for trying to figure out how we should live our lives. And right here is where Christian ethics gets really specific. See, it's not just a general philosophy about being a good person. It is deeply rooted in the life, the death, and the teachings of Jesus Christ. So for Christians, the ultimate definition of good isn't some abstract concept, it's a person. Now, to really get a grip on this, we've got to go back to the source, the Bible. The ethical framework of Christianity really kicks off with a story in the Old Testament, and you can think of it as a story with 4 major acts. So this story kind of unfolds in 4 key stages. First up is creation, this idea that the world is fundamentally good, and that humans are made with an inherent value and a purpose. But then you have the fall, which is what introduces brokenness, alienation, and conflict into that good world. In response to that, God initiates a covenant, which is basically a binding promise, a relationship, to start fixing what was broken. And that leads to the 4th part, the law, things like the 10 Commandments, which provide the practical how-to for living right within that relationship. See how each step kind of builds on the last? But then, when we get to the New Testament, there's a pretty radical shift in focus. Jesus doesn't just toss out the old rules, not at all, but he totally refocuses them. He starts arguing that what's going on in your heart, your intention, is just as important, maybe even more so, than just going through the motions and checking all the right boxes. And this quote is the perfect example of that shift. With this one sentence, Jesus completely reframes a sacred law. He's basically saying, hey, these rules, they exist to serve people, to promote healing and well-being. People don't exist just to serve the rules. The principle, he argues, is way more important than the procedure. Okay, so within any ethical system, right, people think about problems in different ways. So let's explore 3 different ways of thinking that really help us understand how moral decisions actually get made. Let's break these down. First up, you've got situational ethics. This is all about it depends. The idea is that the most loving thing to do in any given situation is the right thing to do. Then there's teleological ethics. This is all about the outcome. The classic phrase here is, the end justifies the means. If the result is good, then the action that got you there was good. And finally, you have deontological ethics. This is all about duty and rules. Some things are just right or wrong, full stop, no matter the situation or the outcome. Now, Christian ethics definitely pulls from all 3 of these, but its foundation, its core, is really deontological. It's built on the idea of certain unchanging moral laws. All right, so how does this ancient framework actually get applied in our world? In this last section, we're going to see how these principles get brought to bear on some really complex social and personal issues that we are still wrestling with today. So let's take something like the caste system. From a Christian ethical point of view, a system that creates inherent inequality and oppression is seen as a direct violation of one of its most fundamental principles, that every single human being is created in the image of God and, because of that, has equal dignity. The response is pretty clear. A structure like that is just incompatible with the faith, which sees the cross as an event that is meant to demolish exactly these kinds of human-made divisions. And this idea of human dignity, it doesn't just apply to big social systems. It gets really, really personal, right down to the most vulnerable moments of our lives, which brings us to one of the most difficult ethical questions in modern medicine. Is there such a thing as a good death? The debate over euthanasia really highlights a profound ethical tension. On the one hand, you have powerful arguments that come from a place of compassion and mercy, the desire to end someone's unbearable pain or what's seen as a life with no quality left. But on the other hand, you have a core principle rooted in the idea of God's sovereignty over life, the belief that life is a sacred gift and only God has the authority to take it. From this perspective, actively ending a life, even for the most humane reasons, crosses a sacred line. So, as you can see, Christian ethics isn't some dusty relic of the past. It's a living, breathing framework that is constantly being forced to grapple with challenges its founders could never have imagined. And the ultimate question it leaves us with is this: how can an ancient faith possibly guide us through the moral maze of the modern world? Now, that's a question everyone, religious or not, can really think about.